Hey guys, I'm John Setzler. Welcome back to the Kamado Joe cooking channel. Today we are going to make pizza again, but this time we are going to make the super thin crust pizza, and we're going to use some of the techniques and methods that are presented in this book by Ken Forkish called The Elements of Pizza. So let's get started. Okay, we're going to start out here in a mixing bowl, and in my pizza today I am using a sourdough starter for this process, and we are going to start this process the night before we're going to make the pizza. We're not making this pizza till tomorrow night, so this is an overnight process. I am using 50 grams of my sourdough starter, and if you're not going to use a sourdough starter and are going to use regular commercial yeast, you want to use 1/8 of a teaspoon of commercial yeast in this process. So to that we are going to add 100 grams of 100-degree water, and 100 grams of 100-degree water is approximately 1/3 of a cup plus 4 teaspoons. And once I have that water in there, I'm going to stir that to get my yeast completely mixed up into the water. And if you're using commercial yeast, you just want to kind of mix it up and let it sit there for about 2 to 3 minutes before we add the flour. Once I have my yeast incorporated, I'm going to add 100 grams of a high protein flour. You want to use either a bread flour or something like King Arthur all-purpose flour for this. You want a higher protein flour, and 100 grams is 3/4 of a cup plus 2 teaspoons. So now I'm just going to work that together. I'm just going to get that all combined, and I am going to cover that tightly with plastic, and we're going to let it sit out on the countertop overnight for 12 to 14 hours. Alrighty, after 12 hours, our starter's looking good. It's bubbly and it's expanded. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to transfer that into my dough tub. And once I have that transferred into my dough tub, we are going to add 225 grams, which is approximately 1 cup of water that's at about 95 degrees. Then I'm going to add 13 grams of salt, and then I'm just going to combine that. I'm going to mix that up where it's nice and loose with the water that's in here. And next I'm going to add 375 grams of, I'm using double alt flour in this case. If you're not using that, just use all-purpose flour. And then I'm going to mix that by hand until we get it completely mixed. After we have that dough completely combined, we're going to just put the lid on the container and let this rest for 20 minutes. After we've rested the dough for 20 minutes, we're going to roll it out onto a floured work surface. And I'm going to keep my hands floured, and we're going to shape this into a ball. May add a little bit more flour. And we should end up with a dough ball with a nice smooth top. Looks just like that. And we're going to put that into a clean tub that I've oiled the surface. We're going to put that seam side down. And we're going to cover that and let this rise for 3 hours before we come back to the next step. Okay, after 3 hours, we're going to take our dough out of the dough tub and put it onto a floured surface. And I'm just using a pastry mat here. It's got a good bit of flour on it, and that dough comes out nice and clean there. So what we're going to do is we're going to flour our hands and flour the top of the dough. And we're going to just kind of loosely shape this into a circle, because we're going to cut it into 4 parts. To make thin crust pizza, this is enough dough for 4. So I'm going to get that shaped sort of evenly here, and then I'm just going to use my bench knife, and we're going to cut that into 4 relatively equal pieces. And then I'm going to separate these. We're going to put a little flour, you know, keep a good flour on top of each of these, and we're going to shape each one of these into an individual dough ball. It's going to be about like that. And then I'm going to put each of these dough balls onto a small baking sheet here, and then I'm going to wrap this. I'm going to cover this in plastic, and we're going to leave this out on the counter at room temperature for another 5 hours. Okay, our dough's about ready, so I'm going to fire up the grill. I've got a fire going in the firebox here, and I'm going to set the divide and conquer flexible cooking rack in place with the accessory rack in the top position. And I'm going to set both halves of the heat deflector on the accessory rack. And I'm going to use a couple of copper tees to create some space here, and we're going to set our pizza stone right on top of that. And we're going to let the dome temperature in the Classic come up to about 550 degrees. In order to get to 550, I'm going to leave the bottom vent fully open and the daisy wheel fully open. And I'm going to open the slider about 1 inch, and we'll let it stabilize here. And once we're at about 550, we'll be about ready to cook. Okay, I've got one of my dough balls out here, and we're going to work right on the pizza peel. And I'm going to use a rolling pin to roll this out very flat, very thin. Okay, after we get that rolled out, I'm going to put on a very thin layer of some of our homemade tomato sauce. And then we're going to grate on just a little bit of fresh Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. And then some pepperoni. And then I'm going to top that off with a little bit of mozzarella. And this is ready to go to the grill. Okay guys, we're riding along right at 500 degrees here in the dome, so I'm going to slowly lift this and burp it just a little. And then we're going to slide our pizza right onto the stone. We'll close the lid up and let this cook. Okay guys, here we are about 10 minutes later, and we have a thin crust masterpiece here. So I'm going to take this off the grill. We're going to take it inside, let it cool for just a minute, and then we'll have a taste. Okay guys, I've gone ahead and cut this into segments, so we're going to have a taste. This looks absolutely beautiful, and as you can see, the bottom's perfect. It's not burnt in any way, shape, or form. So let's try this out. Okay guys, here's the moment of truth. Let's see what this tastes like. That is pure magic. This thin crust made with the sourdough starter has a beautiful flavor to it. It's got a nice crunch. It's absolutely perfect. Guys, you're gonna have to give this one a try. Let me know what you think. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Kamado Joe. Follow us on Twitter @Kamado Joe. And until next time, this is John Setzler with Kamado Joe Cooking Channel.